First of all, I'm going to start off with the definition of a prison. A prison is a place where criminals are confined. This doesn't mean that prison is like boot camp to train minor criminals and make them into more offensive criminals, right? So there was the case of Will Roy. He entered a juvenile hall when he was 16 for just a simple act of robbery. It was no offense, no violent or anything. It was just robbery. When he entered the juvenile system, officials or the guards encouraged him to join gangs because he would be safer. Well, when he did, he got more time for fighting and for using drugs. So as time went by, he became more violent and served more time in the juvenile system. So many prisons don't help prisoners improve their behavior to return back to society. They make them worse. They make their behavior worse and more violent. So today I will tell you how prison affects the prisoners because of the conditions they have to live with, and how the prison system affects our economy. Also, I'm going to tell you how the state should approve resolutions to improve these prisons, to improve the life, so they can go back to society, not being criminals. So, being in prison quickly affects these people once they go in. Like Will, it changed his attitude towards life and his own life also. He stated that he can no longer show emotion for fear it will be perceived as weakness. So most of these prisons are really extremely dangerous, and as in the book Prisons by Jeffrey Paris, he says that inmates must quickly learn to protect themselves from predatory inmates, including gang members who may attempt to sell them to offer inmates as sex slaves in exchange for favors and and for drugs. And it's also in the book it states that as many as 22% of males have reported being victims of rape. But of course there are many more prisoners that are being raped, but they don't report it because they are scared, or they feel like the guards won't even believe them because the guards are okay with this being happening. After being raped, many of these prisoners feel depressed, they feel ashamed, and sometimes they commit suicide. So when they're locked up and they tell them that they're going to be sentenced to 5 years or something, they feel worthless and they kind of feel like they don't belong in society, so they don't want to go back. So they become more violent to stay in prison because they get used to being in prison and don't feel like going back. But I feel like the prison system should change. So because it leads to my next point, which the prison system affects our society because we spend lots of money keeping one inmate in prison. According to the website Bureau of Justice Prison Statistics, having one inmate in prison for 1 year costs about $25,000 a year. But California is one of the largest. California has the most prison. Is one of the most that has more prisoners out of all the states. We have 180,000 prisoners in jail as of today. And so if we multiply $25,000 times 180,000, that means that a year we're spending about $4,500,000,000 a year. And this doesn't include the prisoners that are in private prisons, and this amount, $4,500,000,000, does not include women. This is just males in prison. So, since we are spending a lot of money, we should motivate these prisoners to want to get out and better their lives. And according to the book Prisons also, the recidivism rate is really high. About 2/3 of prisoners released are returned within 3 years. So that means for us, we're spending more money on these prisoners kept in jail. So what we should do is the state needs to add more programs to help these prisoners, motivate them to get out and get an education, get a job, get a family. One of the main reasons for the recidivism rate being so high is because the decline of prison programs offering treatment, educational, and vocational prior to release. And this is also according to the book Prisons. Now, many people would believe that it'll cost more money to offer these programs for these prisoners, but if we think about it, it'll be better for us because the prisoners won't return. So the recidivism rate will lower, so the criminals won't go back to jail. So instead of being badly influenced in prison, they should be offered programs to help them improve their skills, such as computer skills, business or something, so they can get a job when they go back to society and not feel like they're worthless. So now that I have told you how the conditions of prisons affect prisoners and how the prison affects our economy, I hope that you guys know how much we spent and not to judge these criminals when they are released because they're trying to change their life.
Yeah.
So, Victor, what did you think?
Overall, I thought the speech was pretty good. She looked a little nervous, but we all are. She kind of was like me. She kind of relied on her paper, wasn't just like trusting herself and be able to just to say the speech on her own. And most of the information that she gave was pretty much on point. Was pretty much true. And other than that, just like me, we can't rely on our paper. We just need to go up there and just be confident about our speeches.
All right. Well, there is a lot of reading. I wouldn't say that was the biggest issue here. There are a couple of other things that are problematic about the presentation. But let's talk about content issues. We know the general subject matter. I think you need to be a little bit more specific at the beginning about what it is that we're looking for or that you're going to be advocating. At the end, you talk about all the programs that we need to have. And there are a couple things that I think are missing. First of all, there needs to be a demonstration that those programs don't exist already, especially in California, which is where your emphasis seems to be. Also, there needs to be a demonstration that those programs are effective at addressing the issues that you're talking about. I'm not exactly sure how a vocational program changes somebody from getting the crap beat out of them and sold as a sex object in jail. The relationship between those points is not quite clear to me. I'm not sure, how the computer programming thing is going to change the issue of gangs in the jails. It sounds like you've got some criticism of the way the jails are run, but that doesn't really get developed in your argument, and I think if you've got an argument there, that's where you need to develop it a little bit more. On the presentation issues, sometimes you sound a little uncertain, and part of that's because of the reading, but you need to be a little bit more familiar with the material also. Your eye contact's low as a consequence. And that table becomes a prop for you. You kind of lean back against it several times. At one point, I thought you were actually sitting on the table while you were giving the speech, and that just looked really awkward. You are dependent upon one primary source for your information. You have one or two pieces of backup information. For instance, you have the data about the costs of somebody being in prison and the number of prisoners in California, but everything else about the prisons comes from that one book. And if you're going to rely on a source like that, I think you should build up its credibility a little bit more so that we'll be convinced that we're getting an accurate description of what's happening. All right, thank you.